The day Isabella Carter walked into Henry Blackwood's office, the entire room seemed to freeze. Not because she was nervous, but because everyone in the city knew exactly who she was: the daughter of the man who had tried to destroy Henry's empire. Years ago, her father's ruthless betrayal nearly bankrupted Henry's company and shattered his trust in everyone around him. Since that day, Henry Blackwood had become the coldest, most feared CEO in the business world. People whispered that he had a heart made of steel, that he trusted numbers more than humans, and that revenge was the only emotion he truly understood. So when the board suddenly announced that Henry would be marrying Isabella Carter as part of a strategic merger between two powerful families, the entire business world exploded with rumors. Some believed it was revenge. Others thought it was a cruel game. But no one asked Isabella what she felt, because to them, she was simply the enemy's daughter. On the outside, Isabella looked calm and graceful, but inside she carried years of quiet pain. Unlike her father, she had never believed in greed or power games. She had spent most of her life volunteering, helping struggling communities, and building small charity programs far away from the ruthless corporate world her father loved. But fate had dragged her back into it. Their wedding was nothing like a fairy tale. No smiles, no warmth, only cameras flashing as two powerful names joined together in what looked more like a business contract than a marriage. Henry barely looked at her during the ceremony. His voice was steady and cold when he said his vows, as if they were just another line in a corporate agreement. To Henry, marrying Isabella was simple. She was leverage, a way to keep his biggest enemy under control. Nothing more. But the first crack in his carefully built wall appeared on a rainy night, only a few weeks after the wedding. Henry returned late to the mansion after a brutal day at the office, expecting the usual silence. Instead, he heard soft voices coming from the living room. Curious, he stepped inside and frowned. Isabella was sitting on the floor, beside one of the mansion's elderly housekeepers, holding the woman's trembling hands. The old woman had been secretly working overtime, despite her failing health, because she needed money for her grandson's medical treatment. Most CEOs would have fired her immediately, but Isabella didn't. Instead, she quietly arranged a full medical fund for the boy and insisted the housekeeper take paid leave. When Henry stepped into the room, Isabella immediately stood up, worried he might be angry, but Henry said nothing. For the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar: confusion. Why would the daughter of a ruthless businessman show such kindness to people who meant nothing to her? Days passed, and Henry began noticing more things. Isabella secretly paid the education fees of an intern who was about to drop out. She brought coffee to exhausted employees during late-night meetings. She even remembered the birthdays of staff members that Henry himself had never noticed. None of it made sense to him. One evening, unable to ignore his curiosity any longer, Henry finally asked her the question that had been haunting him. "Why do you do all this?" Isabella looked at him quietly for a moment before answering. "Because kindness is the only thing that doesn't cost power, but can change everything." For the first time since their first marriage, Henry really looked at his wife, and what he saw shook him more than any business battle ever had. Because Isabella Carter was nothing like the enemy he thought he married. And slowly, without realizing it, Henry Blackwood began to change. But just when their fragile relationship started warming, the truth about Isabella's real reason for accepting the marriage was about to come out, and it would destroy everything Henry believed about her. Months passed, and the cold mansion that once felt like a battlefield slowly began to feel alive. Staff members smiled more often. Laughter occasionally echoed through the hallways, and the reason was always the same: Isabella. Henry tried to convince himself it meant nothing, that she was simply playing a role. But every small act of kindness chipped away at the walls around his heart. Then one night, everything changed. Henry accidentally overheard a conversation between Isabella and her father. Her father's voice was sharp and demanding through the phone. "You married him to destroy him from the inside. Don't forget the plan." Henry felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. So it was true. The kindness, the patience, the gentle smiles, all of it had been a lie. Fury burned through him like wildfire. When Isabella returned to their bedroom that night, Henry was waiting. His voice was colder than it had ever been. "So this was your game all along?" Isabella's face turned pale. For a moment, she said nothing. Then tears slowly filled her eyes. "Yes, at first it was." The words hit Henry like a knife. But before he could speak again, Isabella continued, "My father forced me into this marriage. He wanted your company destroyed, but I never wanted to hurt you." Henry laughed bitterly. Convenient excuse. But Isabella shook her head. her voice trembling. If I truly wanted to destroy you, Henry, I had 1,000 chances. Silence filled the room, and suddenly Henry realized something terrifying. She was right. Instead of sabotaging him, Isabella had only helped people, protected employees, improved the company, and slowly changed him. Henry's anger began to crack under the weight of a painful truth. The woman he believed was his enemy might actually be the only person who had ever cared about him without expecting anything in return. But Isabella wiped her tears and stepped back. I'll leave tomorrow, she said softly. You deserve someone you can trust. For the first time since the wedding day, Henry felt panic. The idea of her leaving hurt far more than the betrayal. The next morning, as Isabella quietly packed her bags, the front door suddenly opened. Henry stood there, breathless, vulnerable in a way the powerful CEO had never allowed himself to be. You're not leaving. Isabella looked up, shocked. Henry walked closer, his voice softer than she had ever heard. You were supposed to destroy me, but instead you saved me. For the first time since they met, Henry reached for her hand, and this time, he didn't let go. Because sometimes, the greatest love stories don't begin with trust. They begin with enemies who slowly realize they were never enemies at all.